Hey, what's up, Gero 200? Hello from Costa Rica.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches, pura vida. Okay, so we have the better half here, my wife Julia, and she is going to walk us through one of the assignments for this week. We remind you that you have this coming up here, and I did this for the diabetes video as well that we're going to be sending out. But I click right here, and so understand that with the critical thinking assignment, it's all laid out. Okay, you have you're going to sample 3 countries. One of which is a developing country. We'll show you that in a second. And you have 2 different graphics that you're looking at. You can look at life expectancy here, and then you're going to come down here and you're going to look at age dependency in terms of older people and younger people that are dependent on you to provide the income for them to survive. So the best thing to do is go in and watch this video. I did this last semester. It still sticks for now, and just follow the directions. The video makes it very, very clear. Here's your list of, down here, developing countries according to the World Economic Situation and Prospects, okay? And you're good. Follow the rubric, okay? It's pretty clear, okay? It's all laid out there. You just follow the rubric. That's where I'm going to end that right there. I did the same thing for the diabetes video, and that is going to be sent out to you tonight as well. And I had a little ADHD moment, and I kind of messed up the numbering, but luckily I have Julie to help me out. Because it's just a way, I just, when you have ADHD, you lack focus. I don't know if you knew that, but so we're going to go into cancer.
The beauty when your professors are married to each other is we're constantly talking about the class and thinking about the class and doing stuff with the class. And sometimes we screw up, but we figure it out because we're thinking about you all the time.
Yeah, no, it's the best. Okay,
so let's talk cancer. So the reason I asked John to let me jump into this topic is that I'm a cancer patient. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and I've spent a lot of time since my diagnosis, which was 10 years ago, learning about cancer and learning about cancer treatment and how cancer patients are treated, both in the U.S. and around the world. And so it's something that I have a real personal connection to. And many of you will have parents, grandparents, maybe even sisters, brothers, maybe even yourself experience with a cancer diagnosis. When you first hear that word from your doctor, it's a pretty scary moment. I'm certainly proof that getting cancer isn't the end. Well, I was diagnosed 10 years ago. I had a pretty aggressive form of leukemia. I had some unfortunate mutations, which meant that I was resistant to chemotherapy. And the progress that was made, the research that's being done on my particular leukemia meant that I was able to get really great treatment in a clinical trial. And so here I am 10 years later, feeling great, doing well. And it's all attributable to the clinical trial I was in and the great care I get from my doctor and the nurses at the infusion center and things like that. So if you or a loved one get a cancer diagnosis, it is not the end. It's just the beginning of the next stage of your life.
And the estimates are 1 out of every 2 men get diagnosed with cancer in the lifetime, and then one out of every 3 women.
And it's primarily a disease of older people.
It is.
We do see children and adolescents and young adults that get cancer, but the numbers go really way up after, say, 40 or 50. We're going to talk a little bit about statistics. I'm a numbers person. I love data, which shows us kind of where we're going in terms of cancer in the U.S. We'll talk a little bit about prevention and what you can do. You have actually a tremendous amount of control over your cancer risk. So there's a lot that you can do to be healthier and to decrease your risk of getting cancer when you're older, like me.
And let me relate that then as well to the 4th assignment. And so aging is the biggest risk factor for cancer. You accumulate mutations over your entire lifespan. You guys are all having mutations happening in your DNA. Remember, from the bad mitochondria that'll spew out free radicals that cause oxidation. But then you have these DNA repair enzymes that will go in and snip and get out the mutation, and it gets repaired. And your body's like, okay, we've eliminated that mutation that might cause cancer. but they accumulate over time. You get more damage with aging, and then the other thing is we talked about obesity, and so if you have constant nutrition, then your cells just keep dividing without repairing the DNA. If you have moderate nutrition, you give yourselves a break where you go and repair the DNA. And you look at that over 40, 50 years, and the end result is higher risk for people getting older. Okay.
Okay, so every year the US government releases this report that's called the GERO report. And it used to always come out in the spring. The last one came out in October 2022. So the numbers that we're reporting to you are the most recent numbers that we have available to us. And go up a little bit, sorry. And but it's always a look back. So a lot of times when people get diagnosed with cancer, they go on to Google and they Google, what's my life expectancy, and the prognosis is usually pretty bad because those numbers are based on treatments that are older treatments that we don't have numbers yet outside of preliminary data from clinical trials for treatments that are being launched and studied right now. And in my case, in 10 years, things have revolutionized in my treatment and my diagnosis. So it's true for lung cancer, it's true for melanoma, it's true for pancreatic cancer. We're seeing very rapid changes. So if you go into Dr. Google and you ask Dr. Google what your prognosis is, Dr. Google's going to give you bad news. So don't worry too much about the data that's out there. However, we got to look at something. So we're looking at cancer incidence and cancer mortality rates. So we want to measure the data in a way that makes sense. So we can't just say how many people have cancer in New York City versus how many people have cancer in Fresno, because there are going to be a ton more cancer patients in New York City because the population is bigger. So instead, we look at the numbers per 100,000 population at risk. So if I am looking at prostate cancer, I am going to be looking at 100,000 people who have prostates and might develop cancer in their prostate.
Right, and the incidence, I always remember that as IN sensor increase. So that's the number of new cases in that year that you studied. The prevalence, we would just count how many people have cancer right now. Total. Yeah. So that's the difference. Those are two measures when you do public health.
So cancer incidence is kind of a cool number because we can look at steps that we've taken to decrease new cancer diagnoses.
That's the key.
And see whether they're working or not. And we can sometimes see disturbing data that shows an increase in cancer incidence, and we have to stop and think from a public health standpoint, what's going wrong? What do we need to fix? And the mortality rate, it is what it is. How many people in 100,000 people died from this cancer? The good news is we're looking at a decrease in overall cancer death rates. So that's reported cancer death rates per 100,000 people in the US. And it's been going down, and we look by male and female, 2.3% less among males, 1.9% among females. And so we're also seeing a pretty significant decline in death rates in the most recent statistics for lung cancer and melanoma. Why? Because we have these great new treatments that are called checkpoint inhibitors that help your body's own immune system really powerfully engage and act against the cancer. So for people with lung cancer and melanomas, those were very difficult cancers to treat. My aunt had lung cancer probably 12 years ago, and literally she was diagnosed and 2 months later she was dead. That is no longer the case for people who are diagnosed with lung cancer. My father, who was 85 years old, was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had many comorbidities. He already had bladder cancer, kidney cancer, COPD, heart failure, and he was too frail to go through chemotherapy. And he lived probably a year and a half after his lung cancer diagnosis, and he died from something else. So if you get a bad diagnosis or a family member gets a bad diagnosis, there's new treatments out there. So I just want to emphasize the positive.
And he was a cigarette smoker for most of his life, and there are chemicals in cigarettes that, go figure, cause mutations in your DNA.
He was a heavy smoker. He was overweight. He grew up in a rural area on a farm and had chemical exposure, probably chemicals in well water. So he had a lot of factors. So we're looking at this big decrease in lung cancer and melanoma, and that is the good news in this data set, looking at 2015 to 2019. We're also looking at AYA as adolescents and young adults. And so we're seeing cancer death rates going down among adolescents and young adults by 0.9% a year. And we're also seeing it go down 1.5% per year among children. Now, one thing that's interesting about the population of pediatric cancer patients is they are highly likely to participate in clinical trials. So we're seeing pretty good survival in a lot of aggressive cancers with pediatric patients because they're participating in the clinical trials, and that advances the research pretty quickly. So prevention, the answers are easy. I know the answers are easy, doing it is hard. Don't smoke. If you smoke now, try to quit, try to reduce your smoking. Exercise
that's
regularly.
In the background.
There's a lizard on our roof going knock, 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 knock. And later there may be a monkey or something. So can you move it down just a little bit?
Yeah.
So don't smoke. If you do smoke, cut down as much as you can. Try to quit if you can. Exercise regularly. Even for people who are diagnosed with cancer, like me, or many people who are diagnosed with breast cancer, we're seeing really positive results among women with breast cancer who exercise and eat a low-fat diet, a healthy diet, in terms of a decrease in the recurrence of the cancer.
And you know what that does when you exercise? Your cells are burning calories. They don't see the calories. And so then your cells go into, okay, now I'm going to repair my DNA mode. So all the DNA repair, all the antioxidant enzymes that we can increase in every cell happen when you exercise.
And the other good thing about exercise is it reduces your stress. And John and I teach a class in the summer to master's students about the mind-body connection. When you have a lot of stress, it can suppress your immune system. If your immune system's suppressed, then your immune system isn't going out like a Pac-Man and eating up the bad cells and eating up the cancer cells before they develop into a tumor.
And that's what happens.
So we want to have healthy immune systems. So exercise, meditate, manage your stress, eat healthy. Mediterranean diet is pretty good. Plant-based diet is pretty good. We want to try to avoid the typical American diet where you eat fast food and fried food and drink a lot of sugary drinks and things like that. If you drink alcohol, drink moderately if you do drink alcohol. So 1 drink per day for women, 2 drinks a day for men. That may not be realistic for everybody. So I know you're young, you're in cancer, you're living your best, you're in cancer, you're in college. It's like a cancer, isn't it? You're in college, you're living your best life. So what if you drink? Okay, then don't smoke. Maybe exercise a little more. Maybe try to eat healthier. So you have all these different ways to prevent or decrease your risk of cancer. Nobody's going to be 100% perfect all the time, but try to control your risk over here if you know you have more risk over here. Limit your sun exposure. We're down here in Costa Rica. There's a lot of sun. We're applying sunscreen every day. We're being religious about it. We're wearing a pretty, John's going to go get our hat. We got some really cool sun hats that protect us.
Yes, this is the full-on crazy hat.
Yes.
But man, it is intense down here. So when I'm not in the water surfing, this is what I'm wearing.
Yeah,
I even
so
have a surfing hat.
I have kind of a bigger bucket hat. I usually just wear a regular baseball cap when I'm walking at home, but I'm having a little thicker hat, a little wider hat to protect my skin. Smoking is a really big risk factor, and you probably have a lot of older relatives that may be pretty devoted smokers. They didn't know. People didn't know in the 40s and 50s and 60s. There were advertisements on TV and in magazines that told people that smoking was good for you.
The cool people smoked.
Everybody was cool. The Marlboro Man, he later died from lung cancer. So what we know about smoking, what I think is really surprising, my dad was a smoker. He was first diagnosed with kidney cancer, then he was diagnosed with bladder cancer, and then he was diagnosed with lung cancer. There are many types of cancers that are correlated or related to cigarette smoking, including things like cervical cancer. But most of us can understand, lung cancer, any sort of cancer in your throat, your larynx, your esophagus, your oral cavity. For some reason, the cancer chemicals concentrate in your urine and your bladder, so that creates a risk. Your whole GI tract, your liver, your kidney, your stomach, your colorectal cancer, and pancreatic cancer. So most of us think lung cancer when we think about smoking, but that's not the only cancer.
So these are the percent of cases and percent of deaths
So
attributed
Yeah.
cigarette
The
smoking.
lighter line is cases, the darker line
So
is
that
death.
should be kind of sobering.
And that's among, they're looking at,
for my
yeah,
cigarette
from,
smokers.
yeah. So, and we can see this correlation between cigarette sales and lung cancer mortality. If we look at the purple line is cigarettes sold per adult per day. The red line is the rate of lung cancer deaths per 100,000 men. And we see
here
this
timeline.
this almost perfect correlation as we started to get a little smarter about cigarette smoke and cigarette smoking and the risks that it had to your health. The government started to increase taxes on cigarettes. The Surgeon General, the U.S. Surgeon General, released a report on the risks of secondhand smoke. We got rid of smoking in planes, believe it or not, restaurants, public buildings. And then we started to develop good treatments for people who wanted to quit smoking, like nicotine patches and nicotine gum. And California, like many states, has banned smoking in restaurants, in public buildings. You hopefully don't see too many people smoking in public buildings at USC. And then we keep increasing the taxes. If we make cigarettes more expensive, people are going to have to buy fewer cigarettes. It makes it harder for people to support that addiction. And it is a very addictive habit. So,
and there were a lot of public health statements and really cool advertisements that came out on television showing that cancer killed. And instead of being the cool guy smoking cigarettes, it was the cool guy that was coughing and then would die and sit there and die on the screen.
Yeah.
You know?
When my aunt was diagnosed with lung cancer, I truly didn't know that at that time, and this is before checkpoint inhibitors, I truly didn't know that lung cancer was incurable and that it had such a poor prognosis. I did not know until it affected a member of my own family. So, smoking is bad.
Exercise
Physical
is
activity is good.
And we explain why.
Go by. Go on.
I thought we're done here.
Don't go too fast. I got plenty to say.
We walked deep into the jungles today.
We did a cool jungle hike today. John's a surfer. I like to walk the dogs. You know, I've got my Fitbit, so I know how many steps I get. So breast cancer, endometrial cancer, and colorectal cancer. Nobody wants these. These are especially kind of painful, difficult cancers to have. And just walking can be a great activity. Or if you're an athlete and you like playing tennis or swimming or surfing or playing basketball or football, all of those things can help. Playing soccer is great. Any type of physical activity, yoga, Pilates, swimming, just whatever you enjoy. Find something you like to do, and you'll be more likely to do it, and try to get a routine where you do it every day.
And there are likely other cancers that is the same, but you have to run a study in order to make a report. And so that's, these are big time studies, and these studies were done on these guys.
And the bad news about alcohol. So anyway, like many people during the pandemic, John and I turned to a glass of wine every night.
Well, the blues home that we're in, they say wine at 5.
I know. He tried to convince me it was good. So we were locked in our house. I'm immunocompromised. I was really high risk for COVID. And we're in the house staring at each other each day. And at 5 o'clock, we'd open a bottle of wine and have a glass. And then
reduced our stress.
After a few months,
still not a good thing.
After a few months, we were having 2 glasses. And then we came to our senses at some point, and we said, you need to cut down. And one of the reasons we wanted to cut down is all the studies that I read that talk about the correlation between alcohol use and developing a lot of different cancers, colon cancer, rectal cancer, breast cancer in women. And so that's a good reason to control your alcohol use. You're not going to be in college forever. Eventually you graduate, you get a job, and you can't really go to the 9-0 all the time. So control your alcohol consumption. New cancer cases. We're seeing, sadly, an increase in liver cancer. Go back up. Yeah, I know. A little bit up. We're seeing increases in liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, kidney cancer, melanoma, and oral cavity cancer for men and women. We think that the increases in liver, pancreatic, and probably kidney cancer are correlated to a less exercise and an increase in obesity. So maybe diet related. We're seeing more of these cases among younger people. So that's a big concern for people who study cancer data, and we're keeping an eye on it. But we are seeing these big decreases in lung cancer and melanoma. Lung cancer, I think, because smoking is getting more difficult to do. And so that's kind of good news. We have less exposure to the sort of things that cause lung cancer. When we look, now we can scroll down. So when we look at this data, and you'll have quiz questions about this, and if you get confused, don't hesitate to contact me and I can help point you in the right direction. So we look at these trends in the rates of new cancer cases, and it's broken down by men and women. The red bars show increases, the blue bars show decreases. So we can see that prostate cancer is increasing in men, pancreatic cancer, kidney, melanoma, testicle cancer, liver cancer, oral cavity cancer. In women, go back up. Sorry, he's the controller of the laptop. Okay, he's mousing. Melanoma is increasing in women. Maybe we're spending too much time in the sun. I don't know. Liver cancer.
Travel and go to exotic places.
Yeah. Liver, myeloma, kidney, pancreas, uterine cancer, breast cancer. So we kind of need to keep an eye on these cancers and figure out why we're seeing the increase. The increase could be earlier diagnosis, better diagnosis. We've moved people onto both Medicaid and Obamacare in the last, say, 10 years. So more people have insurance, more people are getting tested. And so I think there are people who believe that the increase in incidence in prostate cancer in men may be because more men are getting tested and more men are getting what we call surveilled or they're under surveillance. And now we look at the decreases. There's a lot of decreases for men. In blue. So we're seeing lymphoma and leukemia go down, colorectal cancer, thyroid cancer, lung and bronchus, thyroid cancer for women. So this is all good news. So we're seeing some decreases that can be attributable in some cases to just, better diet, better medical care, things like that.
So, and remember, this is a disease of aging. So if we make advances to let people live longer, for example, we take major steps to get rid of death from cardiovascular disease, then you get diseases of survivors. And so that could be another impact here. And certainly that's what, when we talk about Alzheimer's, that's what's going on.
It will be interesting to see how the COVID pandemic has affected this data. We lost about 1 million people in the US to COVID. Probably 75% of them were over 65. So these are people that had they lived might have gotten cancer. So we might see decreases in some of these cancer incidence rates and death rates that we're seen in older people. I want to talk a little bit about HPV. So we're seeing that oral cavity cancers are related to HPV. We're also, obviously, we think about human papillomavirus. We think about cervical cancers. The HPV vaccine is our first really effective vaccine against something that causes cancer. It's very exciting. We're seeing really great data in both Australia and the US. Australia's a little bit ahead of us. They adopted the HPV vaccine for younger people sooner than the US did. So in the US, you can get the HPV vaccine now, I think, until you're 26. If you're over 26, you can talk to your doctor to see if it might be a good idea for you. But the idea there for both men and women is that you benefit. So, I know some men are like, well, why would I get a shot if I don't have a cervix? Okay, if you don't have a cervix, you still have a mouth and you still have a butt. And
throat.
Yes, you have a throat.
I had a friend who got throat cancer, and it was because of HPV.
Nobody wants to get HPV related cancers, oral cancers, or rectal cancers. So I'm a big fan of HPV vaccination, so it can help you out. So we're also seeing more cancers, like I said, that are related to being overweight, alcohol use, hepatitis C infection, diabetes. So that would point to liver cancer increases.
And while we saw, that there are all these increases in people getting cancer, better methods of treatment. So we're seeing, only a few are having the death increase. A lot of improvements in terms of people from dying. A lot of improvements
in cancer death rates. So the blue means we're seeing fewer deaths. So we're seeing fewer deaths in prostate. If you go down to the bottom, I'm sure we have a quiz question that asks you about, where are we seeing the biggest improvements? And yes, it's lung cancer and melanoma. Yeah. Those magical checkpoint inhibitors.
Get your immune system to go in there and attack.
So Those are,
That gecko is
I know.
getting, wants to get into the lecture. So.
We're listening to the song of the jungle
We're gonna go back.
So anyway, so keep going down, keep going down. We are going to see, unfortunately, an impact from the COVID pandemic because people delayed things like mammograms and colonoscopies and prostate exams and just seeing their doctors in general. And so because we're delaying that sort of healthcare, some people just got out of the habit. And so most of you, I think, have parents who are 40s and older. Go remind your moms to get their mammograms. Go remind your dads to get their annual screening for prostate cancer. When you get to be my age, I actually have colonoscopies every 3 years because I'm higher risk. I think John's on a 5-year schedule, and it's not so bad. It's not my favorite thing to do in the world, but it's fine.
This is a reiteration of that right here.
Yeah, so what we're expecting to see, sadly, is an increase in excess deaths, so more deaths than we would normally see from colorectal and breast cancers in the US because people weren't getting screened. So typically, early detection is important with both colorectal and breast cancer. Early detection means more options for treatment, maybe better survival. So the other thing that I'm pretty passionate about is looking at cancer patients and breaking down the incidence rate versus the death rate. So if the incidence rate and the death rate patterns are similar, that means everyone's getting the same quality medical care, everyone has the same opportunity to participate in clinical trials, everyone has the same financial ability to pay for treatment. And what we see when we look at the data is that there is not that total equity in groups. So what we find, if we look at the incidence rate versus the death rate, is that white people have the highest incidence rate when you look at both sexes combined, and yet Black people have the highest death rate per 100,000 if you look at both sexes combined. So we've got a problem when we see that. So we need to figure out a way to get those numbers more in line. And we need to figure out a way to deliver better medical care, to get more people on insurance, to do better screening, to get better access to clinical trials and new treatments, to get better financial support for people who have cancer, and I could go on about this all day.
And you can identify your cultural group and who you and check it out on your own.
Go back up a little bit. I do want to point out, so white people have the highest incidence rate. Black people, non-Hispanic American Indian Alaskan Natives, AI/AN, actually have the highest rate, sorry. Then white people, then Black people, then Hispanic, and then non-Hispanic Asian Pacific Islanders.
I am so bit up by mosquitoes, guys. I can't even tell you.
He's dying here.
I'm sitting here like on rabbit. I have such a big all
They
over.
do not bite me. They only bite him.
God.
And so we do see if you are an Asian Pacific Islander, that's good news. Something's magic about your diet, your culture, your health care. Something's magic. You have a very low incidence rate, and you also have the lowest death rate. So that is good news. We see a fairly low incidence rate among Hispanics and a fairly low death rate. There are concerns, though, that in the U.S. we have a pretty big-sized immigrant Hispanic population, and people come from other countries where they have healthier diets and healthier lifestyles, and they come to the U.S. and first generation, we may not see big changes. Second generation, third generation, fourth generation, we start to see people adopting the American lifestyle and the American diet. And so then the cancer incidence and deaths rates are going up in the Hispanic community.
This is all kind of a reiteration of everything that Julie just talked about right there. So we're not going to read it for you. Go ahead, you read that, all right, my friends?
Okay. So I talked about the HPV vaccine. Here's data to show all races and ethnicities. Look at white, look at Black, look at Hispanic. We're seeing a line that's going down from, say, the year 2000 to the year 2020. We're seeing fewer cervical cancer cases among women in the U.S. So I am very happy about that. But we have a lot of work to do in in cancer screening, cancer treatment, access to healthcare, trust in healthcare. So we've got a lot of work to do with dealing with the inequities for people of color, women, LGBTQ people. And as a cancer patient, my number one piece of advice is if you have an older relative who gets cancer, be a support and be an advocate for them. It's very difficult for people to figure out insurance coverage, what doctor to go see, what's the best treatment. And you guys are all really smart. You can do the research and help out your family members. Go with them to doctor appointments. If you have a minority group member, and that covers a lot of ground. You can be a person of color, LGBTQ, an older person, a person who speaks English as a second language, someone who's in a rural population. They may not get the same high quality treatment when they go to the doctor. So if someone else walks into that appointment with them, that person can help even the playing field. I bring John. So I can say to the doctor, these are my symptoms. They might not listen to me, but John can say, I'm Dr. Walsh from USC. These are her symptoms, and they will pay attention. So that can help deal with some of these inequities.
Okay, so we're going to continue on. So
okay, watch the video. I'm not going to go into it. Very important for the quiz. We have the normal cell cycle and mutations leading to cancer. So a lot of people don't understand what proto-oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes do. When they are normal, meaning unmutated, a proto-oncogene.
It's a really horrible name. It's just a normal growth gene. So when it's time to make a new cell, a proto-oncogene gets the signal from your nutrition. It says, okay, we got everything we need. Let's make a couple more skin cells. Let's make some more gastrointestinal cells. But then when it gets mutated and it starts making cells at about 1,000 times the rate, now they're no longer a proto-oncogene. They're now an oncogene.
So it's like a gas in a car. And a tumor suppressor gene is a good thing, but then it gets mutated. And then when your tumor suppressor gene is mutated, then you don't have any brakes on your car. Right. So your cancer cells just keep going and going and going, and no one is suppressing that tumor growth.
I mean, what do these tumor suppressor genes also do? They're sitting there monitoring your cells, and they say, they put the brakes on, say, okay, no more growth. They look around, they go, oh my God, look at all this mutation. Guess what they did do? They say, guess what, cell? We're going to kill you. And there's this automatic function, boom, that kills the cell. And then the mutation that was in it goes along with it. But if you have a mutation in this kill cell, then you're in sad shape. Sorry.
So we're going to talk.
Pressing my button too hard, but that's okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about grief. If you want an alternative assignment this week, I know a lot of our students have been impacted by close family member deaths. I understand that. Email me. I can give you an alternative assignment. Some people feel comfortable responding to other students, but they don't feel comfortable sharing their own story on the discussion board. And that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, grief is when you get diagnosed with cancer. Grief can also be when you find out your girlfriend or boyfriend or significant other's been cheating on you. You know, you can go through, your dog dies, on and on. You lost your job. These are all.
Yeah, you didn't get the internship you wanted, or you got the internship and it turned out that it sucked, or maybe you're an athlete and you've had an injury. And you're having to deal with this injury. So there's a lot of things.
You can't surf anymore.
So anyway, the 5 stages of coping with death. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the famous person who studied grief, and it's DABDA: denial, anger, bargaining. It's usually called despair or depression, and then acceptance. Some people are going to go linearly through that list and get to the end to acceptance.
Some people never get there.
Some people are not. When my mom passed away suddenly a few years ago, I bounced back and forth in the stages of grief, and it was, months of grieving and years of grieving. The other day we walked into Home Depot and I saw the little flowering plants in the plant section. She was a really great gardener, and I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to cry in Home Depot. What's up with me? But it's okay, because I really love my mom, and things that bring memories of her back to me will stimulate an emotional response. That's okay.
And this is a really well done video, short video that pulls you through it. This is the imagery that supports exactly what Julia is talking about. And this is the psychologist, I think she was, who came up with this concept of the stages of grief.
And she's one person. She has one theory. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. People grieve differently. Some people grieve by distracting themselves from what's happened. Other people grieve by embracing and kind of really experiencing the grief. So you figure out what works for you. You may have cultural things that help you grieve. It's really about what helps you get through the grief.
Right.
It does get easier as you get older, sadly, because you've had more experience and more practice with loss and with grief, and you come to kind of accept that this is part of life.
So adjust this, watch this, think about it, and adjust it. We're going to say Pura Vida. We're going to go on. You can notice the color of our skin's changing. We're looking green all of a sudden. It's because the sun is setting here. I'm going to show you what's going on here. I like to always show you guys what's going on, and so we'll see if it actually will come through, so you can see. This is this is the background. This is the area that we're hanging out here. You can see the surf is monstrous, and yeah, and so the sun is setting, and it's a beautiful place. Hopefully, you guys can come join us next year and do this really, really cool Maymester. But we're going to say adios for now, and peace and love, and fight on, and take care, guys. And that's it. Okay, peace. There it is. I was looking for my stop signal. Okay, bye.